to talk about inclusive fitness, so that's kind of how to keep everyone happy. I noticed within my teaching, I teach yoga and Pilates and yoga Pilates, but yoga is really where my heart's at. That's what I teach the most of. And I found that in my classrooms, both when I was teaching at the university and out in the community, that I was getting a lot of mixed groups. So I would have collegiate athletes right next to people who had never been to yoga, or people who were pregnant, or I'd have students who maybe had rods in their back because they'd had a car accident. Like a lot of mixed bag kind of stuff. And yoga is something that there can be some pretty serious contraindications. If you know what you're doing and you really try to find safety for all of your students and try to keep everyone comfortable, you really kind of have to watch and know how to include those things. So that's why I decided to look for more information. I have a 200-hour certification with my RYT 200. And it's an internationally recognized cert. I went and did that last summer. I've been teaching for about 3 years now. That's the face you make when you realize that you're about to go from being perfectly balanced to flat on the floor and there's no exit strategy. So now you know that's what I look like when I'm scared. So I'm happy right now. So this is good. Like she said, I'm from Georgia Southern, and that's where I did my undergrad in general studies. I focused on sociology, nutrition, and health. So kind of made my own degree there. That's what's really nice about general studies. And like I said, I've been teaching for 3 years. I've worked with all ages, so I've worked with children, all the way up to, I had one client who was 88 years old, and she had really severe rheumatoid arthritis. So we did yoga twice a week from a bed, and as much as we could to help her flexibility. So I've been really fortunate to work with different fitness levels, as well as different kinds of athletes. I worked with a lot of different sports teams at Georgia Southern, football, baseball, soccer, men's and women's soccer. So I've been able to see a lot and get a lot of experience that way. So I really could bring in a lot of information. Come on in, make yourselves comfortable, grab mats, grab whatever. You guys here, feel free to lay out. Just don't fall asleep on me. But I really wanted, before I got into the meat of my presentation, to kind of find out where you guys are from in the fitness world. If I have some Group X instructors, maybe what your specialties are, or if you're not in Group X, what you came here for. So feel free to shout it out. Raise your hand. Yes?
I teach Group X and personal trainer at University of Southern Florida.
Okay.
I teach a lot of mind-body classes, like yoga, Pilates, and then regular high-intensity guns.
Everything. All right. Cool. Does anybody else have anything different than that? She kind of hit everything there.
I'm Group Fitness and I teach yoga and CrossFit.
Okay.
Cool. Right, totally different.
We're from PEI Canada.
Oh, okay.
We're here on a study tour, and we are in sport and leisure management class.
Very cool. Awesome. Does anybody else have anything different? Yeah.
TRX.
Okay, cool. Okay. Hopefully I can give everybody something that you can take back with you, even if it's just making Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid that we've all seen in health and Kim's classes, you really ignore it a lot. I know I did for the first about 100 times. We're going to talk about it a little bit, because one day I had an aha moment where I looked up and I went, I do all of those things in my classes. Oh, this is relevant for me now. So we're going to talk about that some. Our objectives today are to go over Maslow's hierarchy of needs really, really briefly, because it is kind of boring. We're going to talk about physical modifications, verbal modifications. We're going to define 4 special populations that really kind of encompass the big groups of students that I see as special pops. And then you guys will have some time to give some Q&A at the end. Okay, so Maslow's hierarchy, this is the most colorful slide in the whole presentation. When we look at his pyramid, the base part of the pyramid is kind of the base needs of human beings. We're going to assume that those are being met outside of our classroom, because there's not a whole lot I can do about most of the things on that list in my classroom. So we're going to go right into safety. When you think about safety within your classroom, for me, I can provide safety with props. So things like blocks, and straps, and bolsters, and blankets. On a perfect yoga planet, this stage would be covered in about 10 other different props that I could have in a classroom to really make it accessible. We don't live on perfect yoga planets, so we kind of have to make our own props a lot of times. We're going to talk about that a little bit too. When you step up into the next category, love and belonging, this is a category that we really also, it's kind of hard to meet some of those needs for them. We need to make sure that we stay in a place with our students where they understand that we're friends, we're workout buddies, but we're not counselors. And I don't know what your studio's policies are on dating and that kind of stuff, so that can get a little sticky. And also when you talk about giving hands-on adjustments, that's another way to make poses more accessible or to help students with them, if you're trained in that. I went through a training where I got to do a lot of hands-on stuff. So you have to make sure that whenever you're doing any kind of physical contact with your students, that they understand that this is an adjustment. This is to make the technique better. This is to improve where you're going in this pose. This is not a friendly touch. So making sure that you can define that within your own persona or within the way that you approach adjustments can help your students be more comfortable with that and make sure that they don't get miscommunication with that third category. When you look at esteem, students' esteem, we can praise them for a job well done. If you notice that maybe a student has been coming for 6 weeks, or they've been coming for several months, or they've come to every single class you've ever taught, if you see improvements in their form, or if you're in a class where they're lifting weights, if you see them improve max reps, or you see them improve the weight that they're hitting PRs, if they're in a spin class and they just got exceptionally sweaty one day because they really busted it out, let them know. Be like, hey man, like, way to go. When I have students particularly that I notice, chaturanga is a big one. That's where your elbows are at 90 degrees and your hands are on the floor and you're supporting yourself. It's not easy. I'm not going to make you do it right now because you guys look pretty tired. But when I notice a student that went from not being able to hold that at all is getting to a point where they can hold it for a millisecond, or they can do it several times in a single class, I go up and say, hey man, your chaturanga is awesome, okay? Yoga teachers say things like that all the time. So when you notice things like that with your students, let them know. Be like, hey, that's really cool, or look how much farther you're able to go, or how much harder you're able to push now because you've put in the time. And that can help improve their self-esteem, their confidence. It can make them work even harder when they realize that someone notices that, like, hey, my hard work is paying off. And it doesn't have to be in the form of a physical compliment like, man, look at those guns. Like, compliment their technique, what they're doing. I know our bodybuilders in the back of the room want those kind of compliments. But, so when you bump it up to kind of the top of the pyramid, this is like the holy grail of Maslow's hierarchy, is self-actualization. Getting students to realize that this is something that they did, something that they've accomplished. The little quote at the bottom really, really ties in well with that. A photographer gets people to pose for him, and a yoga instructor gets people to pose for themselves. So at the end of the day, I don't want my students to say, I went to Kat's class and Kat did this, or Kat had us do that. I want my students to say, oh my God, I'm in headstand and I did it. I want them to be excited about what they did. That's self-actualization. Or if you get your students to get a PR, like in CrossFit, if they're looking at a big bar and it's something that they've never ever lifted before, and when they throw it up there, they want that excited face and that moment of, I did this. I came, I worked, I conquered. So at the end of the day, our job as instructors is to get our students to be really self-actualized and to do whatever problem solving they have to do to get there. If they realize that maybe this lift isn't what I need to do and I need to back it up and work on this. My students problem solve all the time. I teach an advanced class 3 nights a week at the university. And so we'll be doing, sometimes we'll do really big poses, sometimes we'll be doing things that their bodies have never ever done before. And my students will use a prop in a way that I never thought to use. That's a learning opportunity for me. When I have a student that comes in that maybe has an injury or a disability, and they say, I hand them a prop, I'm like, try using it this way. And they'll put it there and like, I don't really like that. What if I put it over here? I'm like, oh, go for it, let's see. And we realize that that's a much better placement for a prop for them. Now I know that if I hold on to that, I can use it for students in the future. So now the bag of tricks that Haley was talking about yesterday has just grown by learning from my students. That's something else that's really important as an instructor. Never stop learning. Your certification isn't it. Every single day that you teach a class is a chance to pick something up that's new. Maslow, we're going to get into ways that we can tie all of that triangle stuff into our classes with verbal language. So making sure that it's inclusive and encouraging. That's my big message for the day. Inclusive, positive. And also process versus results. So we want to make sure that our students realize that it's not about that final push when you finally get that big PR. Or it's not about, in yoga, when you finally land that Ekapada Kuniyasana too. Flying lizard, it's a really big fun pose. Okay, think of something that looks insanely contortionist and they're balancing on like 3 fingers, that kind of stuff. It's not about being there. It's about the work that went into that and how hard they had to work and the challenges that they had to overcome to get to a point where they could be in a place there. So it's about who you are when you get to that final place, the process that it takes. We're going to talk a little bit now about modifications. This is my 4 easy steps for how to modify in a class. Like, if you break it down, this is tried and true. If you do it this way, your students will understand and they'll modify. So if we notice that I'm going to modify with you guys. If we notice that we're getting kind of saggy, leaning on our hands and really stretching out our necks, we're going to want to try to lift our spine and let our shoulders relax back and down so that our neck can be happier. Okay? I identified a problem. I over-exaggerated what was happening. I showed the modification. I gave a verbal modification. And if I saw it happen again, I would remodify. I would say it again. So those are the 4 steps. If you're looking around your classroom and you see that on the spin bikes, everyone is doing that forward lean, and they're really hanging on their bars, you say, if we notice that we're pulling forward, really over-exaggerating. With your body as an instructor, make any tiny thing that you notice your students doing a lot 10 times bigger so that they can understand what it looks like. And so if you notice that happening, we're going to want to go ahead and push back and bring ourselves back into the saddle. Okay, so you show it with your body, you have a verbal modification, and you can even repeat it as many times as you need to. If you notice in a class that you're having to give a modification more than 4 or 5 times because of something that you see your students doing kind of going out of form or technique, take a second and review that with your teaching, because you may need to think of a new way, kind of problem solve, to cue that or to bring your students into whatever you're working on. Because if it's a problem that's really cropping up that much, it could be a cue issue. And then we're going to talk about physical modifications. We're going to start getting into that. Roll around, stretch out, do whatever you got to do. Okay? We're going to do a little bit of active stuff later. We've got to get the big things out of the way. So with physical modifications, 2 big camps, particularly with yoga and Pilates, are with props and without props. Like I said, in a perfect yoga planet, I would have all of the toys for my yoga class. At my studio, one of them, all we have is blocks and straps and mats. That's all I got. So I got to work with that. At another studio, we're fortunate enough to have blankets and blocks and straps. And sometimes we turn other props that are in there into props. We don't have bolsters, which are really, really common in yoga studios, and it's a big squishy thing like this. This is my blanket. This has been my sleeping pad for the weekend. So what you can do with a blanket, you can roll it up. Now I have a bolster. I have a way to give myself some lift so that I can be more comfortable in cross-legged positions. I have a way to support my spine when I'm doing supine positions. With blankets, too, if you have blankets and you don't have bolsters, you can unfold them. There's a gazillion ways. I'll talk about it a little bit more. But a million ways that you can fold it to prop and to support. If your students feel like they have a lot of joint pain because your floors are really hard, for a lot of students that's something that's hard to overcome. We have the really thin, people will call them the Mexican blankets. You can lay them out across their mat and have them laid out thinly the whole time so they can have that extra little layer of cushion. Talking more about props in a minute, each one kind of has a little bit more. And then without props, we talk about using things like walls. Use the floor as a prop, and creating modified poses. The biggest thing that I've run into with students when I say we're going to use a prop for this is that I don't need props, I can do this kind of attitude. And they're concerned about it being a sign of weakness or a sign of like, oh, I can't do this. They get kind of a defeatist attitude. And I'm no, props are for fun. Props are to make everything more accessible. When I think of blocks, I don't think about, oh, I can't reach the floor, so I'm using blocks. I'm just bringing the floor up to me. Okay? I'm short. The floor's got to come to me. When I think about using straps, it's not that I can't reach my leg to do that hamstring stretch. It's that I got short arms. I need to use a strap. Would a T-Rex be upset about using a strap? No. He did a hamstring stretch and be happy about it. Okay? Think about that. So with blankets, like I said, you can use them to add cushion, you can use them to prop and support in a lot of different poses. Some inversions are really nice to have that extra little bit of cushion for students. And I have some images and some papers up here. If you're really interested in how to fold blankets, 900 ways, come check it out later. Then with bolsters are really, they're kind of big, squishy. If you've never seen one, they're usually oblong or kind of rectangular. And they're really, really soft. It's like a giant pillow. People think yoga is all about naps, and they could get that idea from looking at bolsters and blankets. But really bolsters are to provide comfort. They're used more when you look at restorative yoga or yin yoga, where you're going to be holding poses for a lot longer and you want to have that extra support and cushion. And then chairs, awesome prop, especially if you're working with people with a limited range of mobility or working with people who have a lot of joint pain, or maybe if you have students or clients who are severely overweight or obese, their knees, their joints are going to be having a lot more weight on them all day long. So they're going to have joint pain. Being able to put someone in a chair for doing their Warrior 1 and their Warrior 2 poses, having that chair support underneath the leg, now I don't have to do any work with my legs, and I can still hold it, I can still find that stretch in my hips. You can do any kind of thing where they'd be seated on the floor, seated in a chair. All those forward folds can happen right here. And they don't have to worry about getting down on the floor and coming back up, or that extra strain and jostle. I like it with my older clients a lot. They really enjoy, you can teach entire classes from a chair. I could go a whole 90 minutes talking about that. Not today. So those are the kind of the props that we're looking at and working with. We're going to talk about verbal modifications real quick. Again, always being inclusive. Using things like we, our, let's. When you talk with your clients or when you talk with your classes, make sure that you're not talking at them and commanding. Boot camp classes, that's a little different because that's kind of the idea, is to make sure that they're going and pushing really hard. There are some classes where they're going to be a little higher intensity, where you're really going to need that to happen. For most group fitness classes, you're really going to want to try to create that air of inclusivity, no matter what kind of group you have, even if no one in your classroom is a special population or has a specific need. So saying things like, today we're going to reach our arms up, or let's take a step forward to our mat is different than saying, I want you to step to the top of your mat, or you are going to, making it really focused on each individual. You can bring it in together. So I was talking about inclusiveness, positivity. Always be positive. I don't know anybody who's a group X instructor that hasn't at least heard that once in their life. So once in a training is positivity. Fake it till you feel it, right? Hey, we talked yesterday about when you look at somebody and you smile, they're going to smile back, okay? If you stare long enough, they'll smile back. So it just kind of depends on what your attitude is coming to class. Come in prepared to give them the best possible situation that you can give them, no matter how many classes you've taught. I teach about 14 classes a week right now, so there are some days where I teach 4 classes in a day. And I'm more of a show and tell teacher. I move around a little bit, but that's probably a good 3 hours of yoga on those days. So I get to times where I'm tired. Man, it's Friday, and I've taught 12 classes already, but I come in there and, hey guys, how you doing? We're going to do this today. This is what we're up to. And I give my best form every time. I give my biggest smile every time. As soon as I'm in the car, whew, I need some water, okay? That's the time to release when you're on your own. Stay positive, stay encouraging, stay involved with your classes. And again, getting back on that kind of process versus results, yoga is a journey. Make sure that your students don't get caught up in where they're at today. Just because you can't touch your toes today doesn't mean you're never going to touch your toes. They're going to be there for the rest of your life. So you can keep trying every day. Okay? Or if they're in a forward fold and they're thinking about, oh, I can't put my forehead on the floor like Slim Susie over here. Okay? That's fine. The floor is going to be there every time you try this stretch. One day you'll get to give it a big old kiss. Okay? So I remind my students of that it's not about where you're going, it's about where you're at, okay? The object of any pose or any position, and you can apply that even through to weights or to, I'm sure with bodybuilding, you've got a lot of things like aesthetics that you want to improve and the points that you have to hit if you're looking at competing. And just because you're not there today, plan out, know where you're going to be when that competition hits, or know where you want to be in the future and say, that's the goal, this is my starting point, okay? Every day I get to start again, right? And making the best positive choice that you can in each moment. Okay, opportunities. All right, we're about to get to the good stuff. This is not a Kat Von Yoga patented word. I think I heard it somewhere else, so don't quote me with the opportunities. But we're going to talk about things that you really shouldn't say in a class. When you talk about students who will come in and we ask, at the beginning of every one of my classes, I say, hey, how's everybody feeling? Do we have any new injuries? Has anybody had any surgery? Anything in the last 6 months that made you stop working out for a week or more? Let me know about it. And that way my students kind of have an idea of a range. And sometimes people will be really hesitant. I now. The students really don't want to talk about what they've hurt or what they've injured. Younger students, my older clients have no problem saying, my shoulder has bursitis, my hip's been replaced, I don't feel like touching my toes today. I'm like, okay, cool, we're going to work on all that. But that smile on, okay, all right. So when you look at that with students and they'll say, oh, I have a bad knee. I'm like, oh, your knee's not bad. It just needs a little extra love and care. Okay, remind your students that when you're cueing and when you're talking, don't use cues like, if your hamstrings are bad, take a bend in your knees to make that forward fold. Say things like, if your hamstrings are a little tight today, or if you need to feel more sensation, fold deeper. If you're feeling enough, back it off. Okay, positivity, that forward thinking. Another cue, if you're in a class where you're working with different levels of expertise, or you have students who've never been to a class or who come constantly, you say, if you're advanced, go to this level. Things like that can really be exclusive. That can make students who look at that big 3-finger balance upside down pose really uncomfortable. They can say, oh, well, I'm not advanced, so I don't know if I can do that. Say things like, if you feel like you need more. Okay? Every single class that I teach, every single pose that I teach, I have 2 ways to make it harder, 2 ways to make it easier. If you can take your big bag of tricks that Haley was talking about yesterday, and kind of try to keep relating back, remind you of what you already learned. If you can take every single exercise that you know, learn one way to make it more difficult, and one way to make it easier, more accessible. Okay, once you've got all that down, bag of tricks, much bigger. Okay, go back, find 2 ways to make it more difficult, 2 ways to make it easier, bag of tricks. How many exercises do you know now? It doesn't have to be a whole new exercise. It can be something as simple as taking a bend in knees, or choosing to sit in a chair for this one. Okay, there are a lot of options that you can have that you can learn so that you grow that out. So you don't have to tell your students, this is what it is, or this is the pose and there's no other option. This third cue, when I told it to the students that we work with at the University of Georgia Southern, I said, if you can't do this, just sit and wait. Like, I hope that makes you all cringe. Because if I ever heard an instructor say that, I'd be like, man, what is that all about? Like, that's not inclusive at all. It's not positive at all. That just tells my students that this is the way. If you can't do it, you're SOL. Okay? So not something that we would want to say. We'd want to say something like, if this feels uncomfortable, or if your body doesn't feel like going here, here's another option. That's another thing. More with yoga, we can give at the beginning of every class an option, that exit strategy, so you don't have to make that face. Okay? Child's pose is a really great option for yoga instructors. I almost always teach it right at the beginning of the class, like within the first 3 to 5 minutes. And while we're hanging out there, I'll say, if you need to take a break at any time today, if we get in a pose that you feel uncomfortable in, if you feel a sudden emotional release that you need a break from, come to child's pose. Be there. Feel free to lay down. Okay? Give your students that option and that exit strategy so that they know that they can push and they can work as hard as they want, but if they find themselves needing to take a step back, they have somewhere to go. So that they're not just stuck in that moment of, oh my God, I pushed too far and now there's nothing I can do. I'm not a big fan of no pain, no gain. It's just me. I feel like I can make gains without being hurt or being in a place where I'm really uncomfortable. Doesn't mean I don't like hard work. I make my students do yogi push-ups. We'll do all-night super core things. So always work until you feel the burn. Not necessarily good for yoga and Pilates. There are other things where feeling the burn is definitely a positive way to know that, yes, it's working, we're getting into our workout, things are going good. So I would rather say, if you're not feeling enough sensation, that's a little bit more ambiguous word, and it makes it so that students can say, okay, for my body, this is where I'm comfortable, so that we're not really pushing to a place where they're going too far, because sometimes that burn can get too far. You guys doing okay? Yes or yes?
Yes.
I thought so. Cool. So that's all we have about school opportunities. We're going to get into our special populations. This is where we're really going to talk about kind of the 4 big umbrella areas that I've learned to work with. I've had a lot of students, especially in the last few years, I've worked with a lot of students who are pregnant, and in varying degrees of pregnancy. So first, second, or third trimester, that's important for us to know as an instructor when they come in, no matter what your discipline is. Obesity, Obviously, it's been big. We've all heard the news, we've heard the statistics, we've seen it in our own daily lives, and we've seen it in our friends and family around us. So being aware of obesity and what they have to tackle and work with in our classes. Athletes. I like to use the words everyday athlete, and then you can have collegiate athletes, you can have professional athletes. Everyday athlete, sometimes called recreational athlete. So anyone is an athlete. If you're here and you're working out, you're an athlete. Okay? Give yourself that title, you're working, you deserve it. So working with athletes, knowing what their level of activity is, and knowing what specific things they work on. So if I'm working with someone who's a football player, and then later I'm working with someone who's a soccer player, when I go and work with those special teams, I know that they're going to have a little bit different needs, but there's also a pretty general prescription that I can give you that most athletes are going to say, if you hit all those points in a class, they're going to leave happy. And then injury, talking about what injury they have, how long post-op it is, talking about what kind of recommendations, or if they do have been cleared for exercise. Ask that, okay? If your students come in and they say, oh yeah, I just got my cast off, or like, oh, I sprained my ankle, went to the athletic trainers, like, oh, yeah, okay, well, what did they say about it? Are you cleared for exercise? And if they give you kind of a, yeah, I'm cleared for exercise kind of look, like, make sure that you listen to your body. That's one blanket statement that you can make no matter what group you're talking about. You can always say, listen to your body. In yoga, I tell my students, if it hurts, stop. Like, don't do it. If you can't smile while you're doing something, then you're pushing too hard. We put a lot of tension in our face and in our jaw, so it's always a good check-in. If you notice that your class or that your group is getting a little intense, and they're getting that like workout phase, if you're in Zumba, it's dance face, okay, that like, oh, got it, yes, intense. Smile. Like, hey, check in. If you can't smile, back it up just a notch. Okay, and that gets your students to realize, oh, I was in trance there. And breathe. Gets them to step back and say, okay, loosen up. It's not that serious. We're going to go into each individual one. Anyone happen to be pregnant this morning? No?
No.
Okay, not that we know of? Oh, I hope not. Okay, cool. Yeah? Henry? So this is what happens when everybody you know comes to your presentation. Yeah, so, but I get to pick on them right back. So when we look at pregnancy, we need to be aware of, these are three big things: dizziness, shortness of breath, and overstretching. These are things that can happen pretty quickly and pretty easily, no matter where a woman's at in her pregnancy. So the dizziness comes with just there's changing hormones, and their balance is off too. It can be really unstable, they may not know. So anything where they're being upside down and right side up, forward fold to standing up, even if I do that, I'm perfectly healthy and not expecting anything but a great big check next week, okay, I can get dizzy. Any of us can get dizzy. If you're not hydrated well, it can happen. But with pregnancy, it's specifically something we need to be aware of. Shortness of breath, as the baby grows, it's kind of compacting and squeezing and squishing things. They don't have as much room for their lungs to expand and have as much room to really move any of their organs as much as they used to. So shortness of breath can happen really quickly because they can't take the same deep breaths that they were used to taking. Also talking about overstretching, when you're pregnant, you create this really cool hormone called relaxin. Sounds nice, right? What it does is allow all the tendons and ligaments to loosen up so that it will prepare their bodies for birthing, for labor and delivery. What can happen in yoga class or in any kind of deep stretching class, any kind of class where you're doing any hands-on manipulations or adjustments, is that they can all of a sudden do splits that they've never been able to do in their life before, and they're excited about it. Yeah, sweet, look at this, I'm pregnant and I got the splits, all right. When they deliver that baby and they come back, they're gonna be like, my hips are tighter than they've ever been before in my life. Why can't I straighten out? I can't even do a hamstring stretch now. They overstretched. That relaxin can allow them to push way farther than they ever have before because their bodies will let them go. But when they bounce back, all those muscle fibers aren't going to be ready for that. So we need to watch for overstretching. Just remind your students that they need to focus on strength as well as flexibility. Okay, so that we're not overstretching anything, we're not going too far. When you talk about pregnancy too, first and second and third trimester. First trimester is first to 16 weeks. As a yoga instructor, that's kind of the time when we really need to watch and be careful. That's when everything is attaching. That's when the most could really go wrong is in that first trimester. So as a Group X instructor, make sure that you're aware of that. Okay? If your students come in and say, I just found out, or in 4 weeks, go ahead and make sure that you understand that that's probably the most dangerous time for them to be doing any kind of Group X. Okay, so from there we get into the second trimester, and that's 16 to 34 weeks. With doctor's permission, most women will return to pretty normal levels of activity, especially if they're already athletic, if they've already been doing different sports, if they've already been working on things like that. If there's somebody who's been doing yoga for years, you can go ahead and assume that they're going to be comfortable and safe to jump back in and start working out again. It depends on their level of athleticism. Third trimester, 34 to 40 weeks, most women start to kind of slow down there. There's just a lot of excess weight, balance is off, and they're starting to run out of energy a little bit. So they're probably going to back it off on their own. Probably won't have to tell them, but if they come in and say, hey, I'm in the third trimester, just know that that's going to be going on. So keep an eye on them. Make sure that they know that it's totally cool to take that child's pose or take a rest. Moving on from there. Let's get some of you that are falling asleep to be examples. Okay? So with pregnancy, when we talk about yoga, there are some things that we don't want them to do. Deep twisting, not cool. Obviously, there's too much going on here to really, really twist deep. Also, laying flat on your back, like you're doing here, can put pressure on the vena cava. So all of a sudden, his baby could be running a blood supply and oxygen supply. No bueno. Okay? So what we can do is have you grab extra blankets, extra blocks, any kind of props that you need. When I have pregnant students, I say grab more of everything. What I have them do is roll over on one side. So whatever side they're more comfortable on. Sometimes they get an injection if they roll on one side instead of the other. Okay. And what you're going to do is go ahead and bend your knees, and we can put a little block underneath the ankles. Okay, give some lift there. We can take our blanket or our bolster and fold it up, and you can put it in between the knees. If their knees are bumping into each other, you can have a block. They can lay on their side and support their head with their hands, just like this. Thank you. You're beautiful, Mom. Excellent. Okay. So you can support their head. They have another blanket there. If the room is really cold, our yoga studio is really cold all the freaking time. Okay. So I'll grab an extra blanket and cover them up. Now they're in a safe, comfortable sideline position for that final relaxation. They're not putting pressure on their back. Okay. There's not any big twist, and everything is supported and comfortable. Cool, right? Yep. Good. It is. So that's one option they can have for final relaxation. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jimmy. Excellent pregnant woman. So another option that we have for a really comfortable relaxation spot, a really comfortable place for them to go, is reclining bound angle position. So I think I'm going to pick on Henry since he said he was pregnant already. We're going to work on him. So what we're going to do with Henry back here is work on a reclining bound angle. If I have bolsters, it would be lovely. Okay. If I had extra mats, and I'd love my students do that too. Take 3 mats. Here's a fun, fast way to make a bolster. If you unroll one yoga mat all the way, imagine laying flat on my distal table. Okay, and we're going to take 2 other yoga mats and lay them kind of towards one end. You flop it over and over and over again, so that the outer yoga mat rolls over the 2 that are inside, and you get kind of a rectangular shape. It's the thickness of the rolled up yoga mats. And it's nice and long. That's an excellent bolster. It's a great way to add a little bit of lift if they want to sit on it. It's a nice way to support the spine if they're leaning back. Okay? So that's what we're doing when we work with a bolster. It's another option instead of rolling up our blankets. This reclining position is where Henry's hips are going to be really tight. Like some pregnant moms might be. They're spending a lot of time just sitting around. What we do is take a strap, and you're going to make it into a loop. They're all different. I've taught my students a million times how to turn your strap into a circle that tightens when you pull on the tail. It doesn't loosen when you pull back on the circle. And they all still look at me funny when I'm like, we're going to make a circle out of our strap. It happens. If you're lucky, you're in a studio where they have 10-foot straps. Okay, so they're really nice and long. If you're not so lucky, you're in a studio where they have 6-foot straps. Really more common there. So what we're going to do with Henrietta, perhaps this morning, is make our strap into a loop. Then we can take our blanket and turn it into a bolster. So I had mine all rolled up and belted up earlier. So we have a bolster. You're going to build up a great big yoga chair. As many blocks, as many props as necessary. Again, I'm a huge, huge fan. So you set one block about medium height. You can turn another block up to high. Lay your bolster on an angle so that the base of the bolster is right behind their spine. Okay. And the rest of the bolster lines up so you have an incline. So when Henrietta leans back, they're supported by the blocks. Okay. If you see they start to wobble, adjust, shift a little bit. Okay. It's not a science. Good. So now we have head higher than heart, higher than hips. That's going to be a comfortable place to be. Chilling, right? Go ahead and sit up. You're not done yet. Good. We're going to go ahead and put the feet together, the knees out wide like butterfly. Okay. Cobbler's pose. There you go. You got it. Cool. Now, tight hips, block. You can snuggle right in underneath there. So now they're supported. A supported body is a happy body. Anytime that you can add more support, you're even going to be able to increase the flexibility and let it open. Cool. Take your hands, put them together in front of you so you get your palms forward. Good. And he's going to swim through the loop. We're going to put the loop over his toes as well from that butterfly position. Go ahead, can we snuggle it up over your head? Let's see. So when you work with clients and you don't have a 10-foot strap, sometimes you have to adjust. Okay, we want it to go down over their low back. Good, and come around and snuggle over their toes. 2 straps can be put together to make it even bigger. Pretend and imagine. Strap over the top of the hips, over the top of the ankles, underneath the feet. Good? And then they can lay back and recline, and be nice and cozy, and be here for as long as they want, and collapsing under your weight. You're so strong. Cool? So they're going to lay back and relax and hang out right here. Hips are supported. We've got that strap now, bringing the ankles in, giving them a little bigger stretch. Okay? It's also going to pull on the low back some to give some release there. Exactly. So that's going to release. Their arms can be relaxed at their side. Really, really comfortable spot to be in. I do this with most of my students if we're doing just a normal yin class or restorative class. But for a pregnant woman, this opens the hips, takes pressure off the low back. It's relaxing. And head is above the heart, it's above the belly. So it can relieve some indigestion if they're having that kind of problem as well. Cool. Another option. Thank you very much. Okay. So think about your studio and about the props that you have that you have access to. I'm going to take that back. Okay. Thanks. Okay. And think about what you can do and how you can build props or make it more comfortable for your students. And when we look at pregnancy, make them comfortable. Okay, that's the biggest thing that we can do. Big warning label goes on inversions. And when you think about anything where they're going to be laying flat on their belly, okay, so they're not going to be doing a lot of cobra or chaturanga. Deep twisting, not a lot of room for that. Big back bends, contraindicated. It's going to overstretch what's going on in their abdomen, and if their back is already kind of tender, it's going to be too much pressure on the low back. And then anything where they're laying flat on their back, like we talked about earlier with JD, too much pressure on the vena cava. Big warning label, but if you have a student who's been practicing for 15 years, and she's pregnant, she's been practicing every day for 15 years, and she's going to be upside down. She can be upside down, okay? If you have a student who's been practicing for a long time, they're just adamant about doing something, let them know. If it makes you really uncomfortable, say, I'm really not comfortable with that in my class. We can work on it after, or if you'd like to practice it within your own home practice, please practice it there. If you're comfortable with a student, you know that they've been coming for long enough to be comfortable with themselves, they're going to know their body better than anybody else. If you're comfortable with them practicing inversions or even tightening back bends, let them practice them. Okay, it depends on what you're comfortable with too. Inversions, deep twist, lying on the belly. One thing here that kind of is a good crossover for, we're going to talk about obesity next. So with pregnancy, anybody that wants to stand up right now, stand up. Okay, if you don't want to stand up anyway. We're going to do a sun salute at the wall. Okay, so you need to find some wall space. I'm sure they're not going to be very happy about us putting our little hands on the mirrors. We're not going to put pressure on them. They're just going to use it for support. Is that cool or no pressure? Okay, well, don't touch the mirrors then. Imagine that you're touching the mirrors. But what you're going to do if you have a pregnant client or if you have a client who's severely overweight or obese is that you're going to go ahead and move them towards the wall, and you're going to have them put their hands towards the wall. You can do an entire sun salute here, okay? So we're just standing up, and our hands are supported at the wall. From there, they're standing up nice and tall, they're supported again towards the wall. Good. They can do a forward fold variation. Hands on the wall, feet there, just bend forward at the hips. Okay, they can move back and up. So they feel a little bit of stretch in their low back. It's a nice, comfortable little stretch. Good. From there, inhale. You're going to stand up. They can take one foot back. So we'll take our left foot back. Okay, right foot forward. So the right foot can come all the way up next to the wall. Bend that right knee. Here they are. The feet can be in the same position they'd be for any warrior pose from here. Right knee right over the ankle. Back foot can turn a little bit. Good. And if they want to take one hand off the wall, or they want to take both hands off the wall and find that warrior one, there's still somewhere where they can grab safely if they need it. They can open an arm out for a warrior two. Still able to touch a wall. Still supported. Plenty of room for baby and all that's going on up front. Good. Think about all the other poses right now, all the other positions that you could be supporting them with the wall with. They can step back in. There's downward facing dog at the wall. Both hands on it. Look down at your feet. Take a nice big step back from the wall with your feet. And take your tailbone and stick it way back into the room. Nobody's looking at your booty, so stick it out. Okay? Tailbone stretches back, chest melts towards the floor. How delicious is that on your shoulders and your back right now? Okay. Pretty nice stretch if you're not in front of a mirror. Good? Stepping forward. They can do an entire sun salute at the wall. You can make it back to your mats if you want. Okay? Those positions and any other thing you can think of with the wall. Okay, even things like triangle pose or half moons. Okay, if I have a wall behind me to support my back, I'm going to be more comfortable going into triangle pose here because I can lay back on the wall a little bit. Okay, if I want to go into a balance pose, the wall's right there to support me. Cool. So those are all kinds of things, options you can use. Doing squats or even a chair pose with the wall behind you. Okay, you can use those in any of your other group X classes. If you've got somebody in there that wants to do weights, they want to do squats, but they need support. Put them against a wall, okay? All options, all ways to make it more accessible, not just for pregnancy, but also for people who are overweight or obese. There's my fabulous slide. So as we roll right into obesity, the biggest concerns that students will have who I've had in class that are overweight or obese, I've worked with, we have a Biggest Loser program as well. I think a lot of schools have picked that up, is when they come in and they're the only one in the room who feels like they're facing a weight problem. I think everyone has thought about it at least once in their life. If you haven't, lucky you. Okay? But concerns about standing out and discomfort in poses, not being able to do something, whether it's a flexibility issue or a weight issue. The biggest knowledge that I found when I started looking online, this is probably the biggest knowledge gap that we have right now in my opinion, within yoga and Pilates training. We don't get a lot of specifics on how to work with clients who are overweight or obese in varying degrees. The biggest thing that I heard is to just have them move whatever's in the way. So if you're doing a twist, and I have a student that does it all the time, if I'm doing a twist and I bring my body into it, even I have to think about draw your belly button off of the thigh and rotate into the twist. If I have a client who's got some extra weight here, obviously pregnant client's not going to be doing this twist, okay? They can move the weight in and over, shift it, make it more comfortable. Okay? Things like seated postures, we're going to work on a forward fold or just a seated staff. Okay? If you got some extra love here, move it out of the way. Okay? Extra love, positive term there. Okay, so we're not talking about moving our butt fat out of the way. Okay, just extra love. Right, so move it out of the way. It's going to snap right back. Okay, no worries. And then you can get more comfortable in your forward folds from there. Forward folding postures, there can be some limited mobility here, limited range of motion. Make it as comfortable as possible. If your students will sit up on bolsters or onto a block, that elevates the hips, gives the hamstrings a little more space, may make it more comfortable to forward fold. Floor's too far away, this stretch not happening. Okay, sometimes after a long workout, that stretch doesn't happen. Put their hands on blocks. Bring the floor up to them. Again, that's what these props are for. Okay, so making room, making things more comfortable for your students. If you notice that it looks like several people in the classroom can benefit from props, and they don't want to pick them up, say, today we're all going to grab our blocks and we're going to set them here. Maybe we'll turn them up to a taller height if we want to. If you make the cue as an instructor that everyone is using this piece of equipment today, you'll still have a few people that are not going to use that piece of equipment no matter what you say, okay? But the majority of your students in class are going to go along with it. And if they get into it and you say, now, if you're here and it feels comfortable and you want more, turn it down a notch. If you're there and you still really want more, make sure that it's your body that wants more and not your head. A lot of times our head wants something that the rest of us doesn't want. Okay, you can go deeper. Tell your students if they feel like they got more than they bargained for, come back up a notch. Okay, making it accessible. I just turned that forward fold into about 5 different options right there, all within the span of maybe 30 seconds for my students. Accessibility, making it comfortable. So moving things out of the way and adding props, easiest way to make poses comfortable for our overeater and these clients. And then inclusive language, staying positive. Again, being able to say, we're doing great, or good form. Make it a blanket statement for the whole room. Okay? Make it feel inclusive. And if you notice that if you know you're going to be teaching a class where you have a lot of overweight or obese clients, I'm not going to be doing handstands in a class like that. We may work on headstand if they really want it, or a tripod pose. If you don't know what these are, let me know. If you look really confused, I'll demonstrate. But things that you know that your students are going to be really uncomfortable working with, okay? Or if you say, hey guys, how would you feel about doing headstands today? If you get the terror face, okay, from everybody in the classroom, tell them to breathe, okay? Because this is upside down. They've been upside down in yoga before, okay? Downward facing dog is upside down. So the upside down part's not scary. It's the word headstand or handstand that seems to be scary, okay? So make sure that you make your students realize that they've been in these positions. It's going to be safe, it's going to be comfortable. If you're not comfortable teaching those positions, or you don't know those 2 ways up and 2 ways down for your students, I wouldn't teach it. I would give them exit opportunities. If I'm doing an inversions class and it looks like I have some students that don't want to be upside down, or maybe someone came up to me before class and said, man, I really got some indigestion tonight. I don't know if I want to be upside down. They can do legs up the wall, okay? Simple option. That way they're doing something and they're not just sitting on their mats while everyone else has fun, okay? Legs up the wall is pretty sweet. So it's a nice place to be. Usually my students that were going to do the headstand anyway, I'll be like, oh, can we do legs up the wall too? Well, yeah, in a minute. They get to have some extra time. Okay, so exit strategies and options. Moving forward, there's the props and modifications we talked about. Invert with care. I spoke really about joints maybe being under some extra stress. Extra props. Props. I love them. I want all the toys out all the time. Okay, that's my kind of class. Getting into athletes. Like I said, sports specific. Some athletes have particular needs. We talk about anything where they're running a lot. So runners, people who play soccer, you're going to be looking at more hip flexors and hamstrings. I mean, obviously, if we're running a lot, we're using those hip flexors all the time. Everybody uses them a lot, but people who run use them a lot more. Okay, hamstring flexibility and hip flexibility for those people is going to be really, really big. So if I know that I'm going to go work with a soccer team, I'm going to plan a hips and hamstrings kind of class. And we're really going to talk about that and hit on it, and they're going to leave really happy. When you look at baseball, golf, tennis, anything where they're doing a lot of movement with the shoulders or rotation through the spine, think about that. When you're planning classes, or even if you're planning classes for working out people who work with a specific sport, you guys are trained to think, okay, my client is going to want to work on some flexibility here, but they need more muscle strength here, or we need to work on endurance for these muscles. It's the same with yoga. We just think more about opening and making space because you guys are busy getting them really, really tight. Okay, so when I think about those clients, I think they need more flexibility in their spine, okay? So twisting, forward, backward. They need more flexibility in their shoulders, stretching the shoulders forward, working circles with that eagle pose, okay? Playing in the poses can really bring a lot of inspiration, especially if you're looking for those options to make your bag of tricks bigger. Do an exercise, and then just like Haley had us do yesterday with those push-ups, change your hands every time. See what feels good, what feels safe, and what feels like it's giving you a good workout. Now you have a new trick. When we get into swimmers, core stability, okay? Strong cores, they're doing that a lot. Shoulder movement a lot as well, okay, with them. Football, depends on what position they play. That goes for most sports too. If it's a team sport, Each position can have its own little tiny differences. I worked with just the pitchers for the Georgia Southern baseball team. I didn't have a whole team, so I got to really be specific with what we did. There's a really general kind of prescription for athletes though. If you work on shoulder flexibility, hip flexibility, hamstrings, most athletes are going to be pretty happy with what just happened. Okay? Because most people are tight there anyway, but athletes particularly find those areas to be really tight. This is my experience. This is what I found. I focus on relaxation and fun with my athletes a lot too. If I'm working with collegiate or pro athletes, they have a lot on their plate already. And when you think about student athletes, they're worried about the game, the coach, the team, classes, grades, scholarships. Okay, they have to get to their workout. Their trainers have been busting them out all week long. That's a lot on your plate. Okay, some of us that aren't athletes have things like multiple jobs. We've got bills, we've got all that. Okay, we need that last 5 or 10 minutes of class to be selfish. Be by ourselves and relax. I really focus on relaxation a lot with my athletes. It's one of my favorite parts of yoga. My students really like it too. And then fun. If they're busy training and working and pushing all day, they want to have fun. They don't want to come into your classroom and be pushed and shoved. Some people like that. Some people have that kind of personality. They want to work hard every time. And I give that to them every once in a while. But I'm really big on fun. Sometimes when I worked with the women's soccer team, we did a partner class once. And they had a hard time doing a lot of the things, but they had a good time doing everything. They smiled the whole time. They were excited about everything. Every time I gave an option to try harder, they tried. And they laughed about it. And they went back to a different option. Okay, they were excited about seeing how far their bodies could go in a different direction, in a different modality. You're bringing them something that sometimes they've never seen or done before. Our last little subcategory is talking about injury. In my experience, the most common injuries that I've seen within my last little 3 years of teaching have been wrists. You get a lot of wrist pain, whether it's someone who just hasn't been working out for very long, so their wrist can't bear weight. Or maybe it's someone who has carpal tunnel. They've had a desk job for 15 or 20 years. Okay, wrist pain is big. Low back pain, I hear it every time I ask, what does everybody want to work on today? Okay, my low back, sore, painful. Okay, bursitis, this is a buzzword. I don't know if you guys have heard it a lot. In the last 6 months, I think like doctors are trying to push a new drug or something because I've heard bursitis, bursitis, bursitis. I'm like, okay, cool. It's inflammation around the shoulder joint. Inflammation around a joint that has like a joint sac, lots of fluid. That's bursitis. Arthritis, if you only work with campus rec, probably not going to see much arthritis. You may have some juvenile arthritis that you run into. When you work out in a community, you start working with the over 50 crowd. Okay? They're going to be seeing some arthritis. They're going to start to see some things like that. Being aware of that and prepared for it is good. And then the other injury, surgery. I always ask my students, if they come up to me and say, hey, I just had surgery, like, where's it at? How long out are you? How far out of your post-op are you? Have you been going to physical therapy? And were the physical therapist recommendations? Have you been cleared to exercise? Okay? If you ask those questions, you're covered and safe from a liability standpoint. When you have to pay for your own insurance, you want to be covered and safe. I'm really, really big on safety. That's why I love so many props. So with surgery, if you ask those questions, you'll be able to kind of tailor and find out how far into their recovery they are, how ready they are to move forward. Making sure that they are comfortable using props, that they just don't push. Again, that goes back to the statement I said earlier about no matter what class you're in, if you make the blanket statement of when we're working on this pose, or today in class, or when we're doing this exercise, if you feel pain, back it up. If your body feels uncomfortable, feel free to step it down to this other level. Okay? Give your students that chance to step back. Because if you don't say it, they may just keep pushing, and they may end up injured again, or even more. This is it, guys, the last slide before the fun Q&A slide. Okay? So this is the takeaways. If this is all you write down for my presentation, this is all you remember from my presentation, if you're not writing, take out your phone, take a snapshot of it. Okay? I do a lot of saving notes that way on my phone. It's always there.
Can we have a copy of the PowerPoint, or are you in? Okay, cool.
Absolutely. I have a slide with all of my information on it too, so you can follow me and find me out in the interwebs. So this is it. Inclusivity. It's safe, it's friendly, it's positive, it's encouraging. Okay? If you have have those 4 points, you're being inclusive in your class. You're taking strides to be inclusive. The only absolute is there are no absolutes. Every time you step into a class, you have a chance to learn from your students. Every time you get a new condition in your class, I get excited. I'm like, if somebody brings me something I've never heard of before, it's rare. I'm like, you guys aren't gonna shock me. Tell me about what's going on. When someone brings me something that I don't know about, I'm like, oh, okay, we're gonna learn today. It's good, learn, be excited, so that in the future you'll be able to treat whatever condition, you'll be able to work with whatever condition or thing shows up in your classroom. Modifying, there's those 4 steps again. When you're looking around your classroom and you see that it looks like the group needs a modification made, state the action, demonstrate the action, demonstrate a solution, repeat yourself as much as you need to. Okay, so that went back to the, we notice our shoulders are scrunching up by our ears, and I over-exaggerated. We're going to want to roll our shoulders back and down out of our ears. Roll the shoulders back and down. And we move on with class. Okay? Usually they'll sneak up there again. I just tell them don't stress out. It's yoga. It's not that serious. Okay? Learn from your students. I said it how many times today. Take every opportunity as a learning opportunity. If you hand them a prop and they use it differently than you expected, learn from that. Okay? If they use it as a pillow, not really a learning opportunity. Okay? But if they move it so that they can be more comfortable in a pose, learning opportunity. Q&A, guys. What do you got? Is there anything that I didn't cover clearly or that you'd like me to repeat? I've got a slide with my information if you want me to send you the PowerPoints later too. Do you guys have any specific questions, injuries you run into, or clients that you've worked with? No? Yeah?
Do you teach like prenatal classes, or do you just have those individual clients, or a mix? One-on-ones with, okay.
That's a good question. With prenatal yoga and postnatal yoga, you can have entire classes that are prenatal and postnatal geared. Some studios are fortunate enough to have pre and postnatal classes or mommy and me kind of classes. The studios where I work with, we don't have that. So for me, it's usually 1 or sometimes 2 students that'll be in a class with everybody else from the general population that come in and they have special needs. When I first started teaching and I ran into that, it was really like, oh my God, scary moment to all of a sudden have someone who's in the middle of their 2nd trimester in a classroom where I have everybody else. Everybody does prenatal yoga on those days, and nobody really complains. Prenatal yoga is really nice for the hips, it's good for the low back, it's pretty relaxing. So most of your students aren't going to know unless you say, we're all doing prenatal yoga today. And most of them are going to be happy with the stretch that they got. So that's a really easy way to say, we're going to take care of this today.
What are some?
Oh no, you got.
What are some specific poses that you just will not do for someone that's pregnant?
With my students, I'm working with people who have maybe been in yoga for less than 5 years. I don't think I've had anybody in my studio that's been into yoga for more than that, just because I work in kind of the college environment. Some of my clients have been in it off and on for a while. So inversions, deep twisting, deep back bending. These are things that if I had chairs in my studio, I might be able to make them a little bit more accessible, but I really just wouldn't practice it with them. I would have them do the reclining Baddha Konasana, that reclining bound angle that Henry demonstrated for us. Or I would have them do a different seated stretch, something so that they can be comfortable and still doing something if the rest of the class happens to be doing an inversion during that time.
What do you think about like Warrior One and Crescent for pregnant women? Because I know some people say don't do it at all because it can cause the placenta to detach from.
That's a big issue within, like I said, when we talk about the 1st trimester. 2nd trimester, they're going to be a little bit safer off. 3rd trimester, everything's pretty well attached. Again, it depends on the woman's athleticism too. If it's someone who's come into your studio, and this is for any kind of group fitness class, if somebody walks in and they say, hey, my name is Susie, and I'm pregnant, and my doctor said that it would be really nice for me to do some exercise while I'm pregnant, you're like, cool, well, have you worked out before? They're like, no, I really haven't been to the gym much. Maybe I've done some Pilates videos from YouTube. You're like, okay, this is someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, they may not know their body, so you want to take it more gently. If you have somebody come in, and it's Jill, and Jill's pregnant with her 4th child, and she's been doing yoga for 15 years, and Jill's going to do what Jill wants to do, then Jill's going to do what Jill wants to do. Okay? So know your clients, how long they've been practicing too. Warrior one and crescent pose, we're here. If you have a chair, they can give them some props here. It would be nice, again, taking it to a wall so that they have some support with the wall if they're scared. Crescent's just taking it back there. Little bitty back bend, okay. Big back bend, probably not okay. Listen to their bodies. Find what feels comfortable for them. Can I answer your question? Yes?
For geriatric populations, do you make an overall statement or precaution about any kind of spinal flexions as something to say to the generality of the group, or maybe if you just see like one or two elderly people?
Yeah, when I work with kind of the blanket statement I make at the beginning of my classes, again, is, and you can feel free to take these words and use them as your own. I say, hey guys, my name is Kat, welcome to yoga. Does anybody have any injuries, any recent surgery? Is there anything that we just really want to work on today? And then if my students aren't very forthcoming, sometimes nobody wants to say what's going on. I'll usually say, listen to your bodies. Make sure that if something doesn't feel good, stop doing it. Back it off, take another option. Don't push until you feel pain. And that way they know that it's okay that if they feel something that doesn't feel right, usually they'll make that face too, that kind of okay, face yoga, not good in the yoga studio. It's always smile, okay? So we know we're comfortable, we're safe where we're at. Yes?
Two questions. So you said you have taught children's yoga before. How is that? Like, the difference? Like, how did you have to teach that?
Working with children, and you can get specific. I'm going to go ahead and flip to my information just in case you guys. This is my references. This is what I use. For some of the information, a lot of it's just drawn from my personal practice, my personal experience. So most of it's what I've learned and I've picked up. Some of these are just really good books to have around. Stephanie Keach is the woman I did my 200-hour training with. So this is her book that she had us purchase, full of good information. She's been practicing for tons of years. She did inversions while she was pregnant. But Stephanie does what Stephanie wants. So that's where we learned that. And then that's my contact information. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. I have a blog, nutrition and yoga stuff. That's my email. Feel free to ask me any questions about this or anything from yoga in general. I've been in it for a little while now, and it's my passion, so I should be able to help you out. So feel free to ask that. Back to the children's yoga. You can get specific certifications. There are some books and boxes of like cards and decks and things. I've taught and worked with kids a few times. It's a whole different experience. When you think about a typical class, and I feel like it'd probably be the same if you were trying to teach them any kind of exercise. When you think about your typical structure and the kind of reps and sets kind of situation, it's not really going to work with kids who are, if they're less than like 4th grade or so, you really want to gear it more towards maybe some games and funs. We do Yogi Says, like Simon says, stand up in front of the classroom. We'll have like 5 or 6 poses with kids, and we'll do Yogi Says tree pose, and we all get in tree pose. Yogi Says elephant breath, and we all do elephant breath. And then I'll say crow pose, and we'll squat down, but Yogi didn't say. So if you squat down, then you're it. It doesn't mean you're out. It means you get to come to the front and be Yogi. So inclusiveness, okay? Nobody's out. I know some people are not a fan of that, but when you're working with kids and you're trying to stay in that kind of yoga environment, then they get to be at the front. They get to be Yogi Says, do tree pose, and it's things like that, kind of games that you can create with the poses. If you can have parents with them, it's a little different situation. But once they get over about 4th grade, if they're really interested in yoga, those kids will be comfortable being in a normal like a beginner's class or an all levels class. If your studio allows that, if you're comfortable with it as an instructor, invite them in. The younger we can get them to start being active, the better. Okay. Good?
Yeah.
Do you have a second question? Was that?
Well, you had said that you taught 14 classes a week. I'm just wondering how it's a lot.
Yeah. I've graduated already, so this is my full-time job. I teach yoga and Pilates, and I dog sit to pay the grocery bill because I like food. So this is what I do, and I love it to bits. I teach 3 advanced classes and 1 intermediate, and then the rest of them are all kind of all levels classes. And I'm at 2 studios and 2 gyms, and then I have some private clients. So it's busy, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Oh,
Sorry.
What did you learn the information that you had regarding
with friends. Some of that that. It's like, general studies is like having 3 minors instead of a major and a minor. You get to kind of make it whatever you want. It's nice. So with my yoga cert, I did that outside of, just like you do any other spinning certification, or you would do a CrossFit certification. You do that outside of what you're studying. Everybody? If I miss anything, because we're getting close on time, we have a few more minutes. If I miss anything, again, feel free, you can come talk to me now, or you can email me anytime. Find me on any of those interweb Google machine things, and come check me out. If that's it, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.